growing up, I always went trick-or-treating with my next door neighbor. And at some point, my parents had added a bunch of siblings that got old enough, and my parents didn't want to take them trick-or-treating anymore. So they decided that Halloween was satanic, and I was going to be allowed to celebrate one last Halloween because I'd been asked out on my first date, and it was to a church Halloween party. Okay. So this like I said, it was my first official date. He asked me a month early. It was very sweet. He was a very sweet kid. But my mom got my costume, and my mother always told me what I was dressing as. I never got a choice, really. And it was, those of you who are from church might recognize this bit, I was one of the 10 virgins. Yes. Uh-huh. There is a piece of scripture that talks about 10 virgins who are waiting upon the bridegroom, being Christ, to return. 5 of them have their oil lamps full with oil and are ready, and 5 of them do not. And when the bridegroom comes, they say, please, please give us some of your oil. And the 5 who have oil say, sorry, but if I give you some, we won't have enough. So no. And so be ready is the lesson. So my mother tells me this is what I'm going to be, to the point that she's gotten me a Bible-esque type outfit. And she had a little brass bookend. She had a lot of brass bookends, but she had one that was kind of like a little lamp. I mean, not even a lamp, like a little oil jar. And of course, I did ask her, this came up last night when I was telling this story to my children. I did ask her about there not being oil in there, but it's there. Don't worry, I'm prepared. I'm not one of the 5 bad virgins. So I go to this party, and it's a large church here in town, or it used to be large. I went to Clovis E.V. Free's Halloween party, and people would ask me, so what are you? And so I say to them, I'm one of the 10 virgins. And then I start explaining. Those of you who have been around teenage boys or people, when you go, I'm one of the 10 virgins, what do you think the common response was? There's only 10 left? Of course, I'm 14 at this point. Frankly, I'm too young to have a boyfriend who, he was a nice guy. He was 16, but I was too young. But so I'm just dying. I'm just so embarrassed. I'm just, but I say this over and over because who are you? What are you? To the point that they're like going around the mic at one point, having people say who they are. And the people I was with, my boyfriend at the time, he was dressed as a magician. He was a magician. Yeah, that's another conversation. He was a great guy. And his brother was a run over crossing guard, and like they'd run over it because his brother, my date, drove. But it was just a lot of, there's only 10 left. And just, I was bright red the whole night. So I'm telling this story last night, and my 22-year-old looks at me. She goes, why didn't you just tell people you were someone else? Like Mary Magdalene, who's the first to see Christ, or Mary, the mother of Jesus, or anyone else. It never crossed my mind to say someone else because my mother told me that's what I was dressed as. Now, I don't necessarily write this off to me just being young. My 22-year-old looks at me and she goes, well, it's a good thing you're not autistic or anything. Yeah, okay, so maybe my absolutism definitely has something to do with it. But as we're telling the story, my husband is getting more and more annoyed. He's not angry. You can just tell something's bothering him. And he says, your mother told you what you were? You didn't come up with that? I said, oh, no. Like she came home with it and informed me what I was going to be because I figured I'd be a Supreme Court justice. That was always my go-to. And he's more and more bothered. And he looks at my daughter. He says, no, the reason she didn't tell anyone what it was is you do not realize how under this woman's thumb she was. And he says, I cannot believe she set you up like that. And it was the first time it hit me. My mother set me up to be embarrassed. And I believe it was on purpose. I truly believe it was on purpose. It just never crossed my mind. It never crossed my mind to tell them I was anyone else other than one of the 10 virgins because that's what I dressed up as and that's what my mother told me I was and whatever. And I will be honest, this whole month-long ramp up to this date, my mother was a pain and tried to scare me about I was going to do something wrong and she wasn't going to let me go and it was going to, all of it. And he says, let me guess, when you got home, it's like, oh, what did they say? How many times did you get asked and what did they say each time? And I'm like, oh yeah, my mom totally did that. Now, to be fair, I would have asked my kids what had happened if I was the mom in the situation. But I am 50 years old and it is only for the first time in my life. And I've told that story dozens of times because it's hilarious. I was one of the 10 virgins. I mean, talk about, this is worse than when I wanted to be the second female Supreme Court justice, and my mother finally just said, tell everybody that you're Sandra Day O'Connor. For years, that was like my 7-year-old and 8-year-old Halloween costume. But my mother set me up. My mother enjoyed the embarrassment I felt because I was almost in tears as I'm telling her about this. And when we discussed it, when I was getting dressed, I'm like, can I be someone else? This is kind of a weird costume. This is kind of a weird explanation. I understand, it's like, well, no, if you're going to get dressed up, you have to go as a Bible character. And it's like, I mean, I love Queen Esther, for those of you who don't know, and I love Ruth, but no, my mother set me up. And at 50 years old, 2 facts for the first time came to me. I could have just told people I was someone else in the Bible, but my absolutism of this is what it is, couldn't do it. And my mother set me up to embarrass me. Imagine setting up a 14-year-old kid. This was a public school party, meaning it was at a church, but these are all public schoolers. These are all, cooler people than I still am. I'm kind of today, we were talking about this last night, reeling a little bit, but I did notice my husband got more and more upset. He's like, I never realized your mother picked out that costume and told you who you had to be. She set you up. To parallel this, my daughter decided one year she wanted to be a fancy dressing person. That's what she wanted to be. So she wanted to put on like a fancy, like we picked it up for free in a free cycle thing, like a fancy like prom dress. I'm like, you can say you're going to a prom, you can say you're a beauty queen. And she's like, no, I want to be a fancy dress person. And I tried talking her out of that being her explanation. This was the opposite. My mom found something embarrassing and made me dress up as it. And it was the only way I was going to get to go on this date. Wow. Someday I will understand the totality, I think, of what had happened to me in my childhood, but it hasn't happened yet, my friend. But my husband sees it with a much clearer eye than I do. Maybe it's because he had decent parents and he saw what weird was. But I don't know. But yeah, my last Halloween dressing up, I was one of the 10 virgins. I can say I'm not one of those anymore, but the 4 children may have been a hint. But yeah. So that's my traumatic, weird, funny, odd Halloween story. What's yours? Bye.